we're going to get started. First, we would, in true Nuestra Voz fashion, we would like to give thanks, honor, and reverence to the space that we're in. We're on Bobancha land, which is the land of many tongues. And we have a land acknowledgement that we have created. It's on that membership card if you were able to get one from JC. If not, I'm going to read it out loud to the collective. Feel free to read it along with me. Our land and labor acknowledgement. We recognize our debt to exploited workers, past and present, whose labor was and continues to be stolen through unjust practices. We respectfully acknowledge our debt to the enslaved people, primarily of African descent, whose labor and suffering built and grew the economy and infrastructure of a nation that refused to recognize their humanity. We also acknowledge that many indigenous groups native to the Americas were also enslaved at the hands of settlers during colonization. We acknowledge our collective debt to the indigenous people of this land whose labor was forced and exploited. The Chinese immigrants who built railroads and allowed for westward American development. Chinese Americans whose properties and livelihoods were taken from them while incarcerated during World War II. And migrant workers of the Philippines, Mexico, Caribbean, and Central and South America who have worked farms and warehouses. We recognize the immigrant and American-born workers of African, Asian, Central, and South American descent whose labor remains hidden in the shadows but still contributes to the well-being of our collective community. We recognize that our economy continues to rely on the exploited labor of incarcerated people, largely people of color, who earn pennies an hour while generating billions in goods and services each year. We know that there are many other people, too numerous to mention, who are prevented from reaping the true value of their labor by unjust systems and cruel practices. We mourn their loss of life, liberty, and opportunity. We acknowledge that the theft of labor is the theft of generational progress. Nearly all people of color have been robbed of this opportunity and wealth that their ancestors might otherwise have passed on to them. So we give thanks and honor for this land. We give thanks for, I was going to call her in later, but in true Mama Denise fashion, she was one of the people that came on the border trip with us. We are shoulder ready. We are standing on the shoulder of giants, and we want to open up the space, really honoring and giving reverence for the people who have laid the path before us. I realize that I'm going to switch it up today. I know that panels typically are like people talking at you, but since this is an intimate conversation, we're actually all going to speak to one another. I want you to look towards somebody in your vicinity, let them know your name and your pronouns. So it would look like this. My name is Tiye Jones or Davis, depending on how I'm feeling. My pronouns are she, hers. You can introduce yourself about how you're feeling today, like what are you grateful for today? You can talk about what excites you about this conversation or what led you here. Does that sound good? Wonderful. So movements are fueled by radical acts of generosity. We're here with our brothers and sisters to talk about what does migration look like for our Black and brown brothers and sisters. This is our second installment. The first one was focused on the divine feminine energy that happened at the border. Like I said before, I want to lift up Mama Denise Graves into the space. She's of Peace Ministries. She also works with the Congo Square Preservation Society. She's an elder in the community. And her and Homero were really instrumental on our trip, grounding us in spirit, grounding us in our collective genius, opening up the space. And where we were was Kumeyaw land, the indigenous people of Southern California. And I just wanted to honor them and lift them up to all the femme-bodied panelists that happened at the first round. It was fabulous. It was wonderful. It was at the New Orleans African American Museum, and now we're here for part two. And we're going to get into it. I want to call our brother. This is really my brother from another mother. We switched. I moved to New Orleans. He moved to Oakland. I'm originally from Oakland. Now we've been reunited. We've known each other for all of 6 months, but it feels like forever. My brother Nate up to do our libation. as we enter into the space, and then we'll get started. Do you need a microphone? It's over there, Nate.
We're going to get a little louder. How's everybody doing today? Isn't Tiye doing just a beautiful job? All right. Okay. Lawyer, I'm going to call you up and put you on the spot. Come on up, lawyer. Come on up. I want you to help me. Come on, help me. Come on. So for those of you who do not know, in the ancestral practice of the pouring of libations, it comes from Europe, but it's an African practice that is honoring those that have come before us in many different ways. And so those that are not familiar, come and talk to one of us. We can get a little bit deeper into it, but we definitely want to be intentional about that. Kind of piggybacking off of Tiye with the land acknowledgement, this is also our ancestral ways of being connected and honoring those people that came before us. So first of all, we just want to make sure everybody is, we want to make sure everybody's comfortable. Make sure you sit in a comfortable position. You're touching something. That something can be the chair. That something can be the ground. That something can be your neighbor if you got consent. Don't do that on our time. No, don't do that at all, but especially on our time. But we want to make sure that you're comfortable. We want to make sure that we're grounded. We're in a space that we can move. And every time that we pour, every time that I say pour, Brother Lawyer, and in true spirit, we always have one of the elders to guide us and lead us. And so, which is why we have Lawyer, who's one of our members, one of our member leaders. And so when I say Ashe, after we pour, I say Ashe, which is Yoruba for it is so, which just means that we are collectively agreeing. Ashe?
Ashe.
Oh, y'all quick. Yes, I like it. All right, here we go. So today, we gather here to honor and pay tribute to our ancestors, and most specifically, the remarkable journey of all migrants. For those that are not familiar with the practice, we pour libations to acknowledge their resilience, strength, and the invaluable contributions they have made to our society. This pouring of libations is a sacred act, deeply rooted in African traditions, symbolizing the connection between the living and the ancestors who came here before us. After every pour, we will collectively say, Ashe. Pour for us, please, brother. Ashe.
Ashe.
Beautiful. We pour libations to honor the ancestors who, despite being forcibly uprooted from their homelands, carried with them the rich tapestry of African culture, traditions, and knowledge. They brought the rhythms of their drums, the melodies of their songs, and the wisdom of their oral traditions, which continue to resonate in the hearts and minds of Black and brown communities around the world. Pour, please.
Ashe.
Ashe. We pour libations to honor the ancestors who, in the face of adversity, sought refuge and opportunity in new lands. They braved the unknown, leaving behind everything they knew, in search of a life free from oppression and discrimination. Their courage and resilience paved the way for future generations, inspiring us to strive for a more inclusive and just society. Ashe.
Ashe.
You got some on your hand. Oh, he got a little water on his hand. That ain't nothing but the spirit. That ain't nothing but that. Wipe that on there. A little ancestral juice. We pour libations to honor the countless contributions of Black and brown migrants to the arts, sciences, politics, and every facet of society. From the literary brilliance to the scientific breakthroughs, their achievements have enriched our world and shattered barriers. Ashe. And as we pour these libations, let us also acknowledge the challenges that all migrants continue to face today. Let us remember those who have been displaced by conflict, poverty, and persecution, and strive to create a world where each person can live with dignity and opportunity. We shine a light and take a moment for recent ancestors Ernesto and Anadith, who lost their lives in ICE detention centers. Let's take a moment for them. Ashe.
Ashe.
Ashe. And if you have any ancestors that you would like to call into the room, or any ancestors who you are standing on the shoulders of, that you carry with you, I want to allow this time now for you to call those ancestors' names so that we may bring them into the realm as well. I'll start with my mother, Vanessa Cameron.
Ashe.
Please yell out the names of any
Carmen
ancestors that you have.
Brown, James Haber Brown, James Barlow, Ida Mae Anthony, Clarence Thorne, Hattie Thorne, Roscoe Hunter, Rosalie Hunter, Ashe, Ashe, Ashe.
One more time. Let's do a collective ashe. 1, 2, 3.
Ashe.
Thank you. I appreciate you all. One more for it, Brother Lawyer, please. It is so. Thank you. Yes, sir. Empty it out. Give it to him. Give it all to him. Thank y'all. Appreciate you all.
Thank you, Nate. We give thanks.
Thank you.
So some folks came to our first talk, but I want to talk a little bit about the purpose and the power of the trip. And so many folks know, we'll get into it a little bit more because we actually have experts here on the panel that can tell you a lot more about this than I can. But the purpose and the power of the trip was to bring Black American leaders to the border, to help Black American leaders understand how critical the challenges that Black migrants are facing at the border. So we were able to encourage a dynamic group of 20 Black leaders from New Orleans, Black and brown leaders from New Orleans, all from legal to arts, musicians, to folks who work in LGBTQIA spaces, nonprofit executives, folks in philanthropy, clearly, that's why we're here tonight. And we really wanted to help Black American leaders in particular understand and expand their worldview of what is immigrant rights? What does it mean to be a migrant? What are some of the challenges that migrants are facing? And while it is true that as Black Americans, I can speak for myself, being a migrant is not my personal story, it is my fight. And how can we be encouraged and how can we lock arms with our migrant brothers and sisters as we are thinking about our collective liberation and freedom? So we went in April. I trekked along my husband and my 6-month-old daughter at the time. She's 9 months now. And we had a magical, spiritual time. And so we're going to get into that. But I want to spend a few minutes doing a couple of things. I want to first introduce our panelists. We have our sisters on Zoom, and then we're going to get into some conversation. So our first, Taylor, oh, okay, great. Taylor's on it. No, let me just start talking. That's what I'll do. You can focus on tech. I'll focus on talking. So Guerline Jozef is a human rights activist who has dedicated her life to bringing awareness to the issues that affect all of us locally and globally, such as immigration, domestic violence, child sexual abuse, and other human rights issues. Guerline has testified in front of the United Nations and at the United States Congress to demand the humane treatment of Black migrants. Daheen works at the Haitian Bridge Alliance. They are colleagues. She is the director of the humanitarian director. And for the past 15 years, she has worked to fight for the rights and humane treatment of immigrants and minority groups through collaborations with various organizations, local and state departments, and community leaders. This work has looked like advocacy, fair policy, providing interpretation and translation services, and finding resources for migrants. We have Homero Lopez here, the son of a migrant worker. Homero grew up moving around the country and living amongst immigrant communities his entire life. He's the co-founder of Immigration Services and Legal Advocacy, ISLA, a legal service organization that defends the right of migrant communities. Taylor's gonna work on that. And advocates for a just and humane immigration policy. We have Dennis Bagneris Jr. here, program officer at the Kellogg Foundation. He works at the foundation to prioritize New Orleans as a city where children and working families can thrive and live in a more equitable community. And Jailaih Gowdy, individual giving manager at the Women Foundation of the South, a public foundation led by and working for women and girls of color in the southern states here in America. We got international partners, so I got to be specific, and works closely with individual donors who fundraise for their mission to center and invest in our collective power, health, well-being for women and girls of color in the U.S. South. So I first want to welcome Guerline and Daheen to the space. One thing I wanted to talk about in particular with you all is that we're here to talk about philanthropy's role in funding and supporting Black and brown migrants and what we can do as a community who are gatekeepers to people who are looking for safety, freedom, and a new home. Guerline, you said something that was so profound. We went to the U.S.-Mexico border for the Haitian community, but we saw our African and Central American brothers and sisters, so we stayed for them all. It's been a while since we've spoken. I want to first say, hey, family, how are you doing? We miss you dearly. Tell us about what's been going on, what's been up since we've last connected with you all.
Hello, family. It is so great to see you. Diane and I were just saying we want some wine and some gumbo. We are unable to be in person with you, so it's a blessing to be on Zoom. But before I answer your question, Tiye, first of all, thank you so much for your leadership. Thank you for everyone who came to bear witness to the realities of our brothers and sisters. Being from Haiti, I always say when we talk about New Orleans, when we talk about Louisiana, we are literally family. We are related by blood, not just as a community, but we are real family. We all know the relationship, the history between Haiti and New Orleans. We all know the history between Haiti and the United States. We all know the fight for freedom that our ancestors brought from Haiti to the world, right? So I just want to say it is an honor to be in your presence. It is an honor to be able to speak with you today and really look into what's been happening at the border. And I know that for many people, when we talk about immigration, when we talk about the border, until September 2021, we always had the idea that the border was mostly brown folks from South and Central America, and really also forgetting about the Gowdy community in South and Central America. We have a large community, Black people in those countries who are also being left behind, who are completely invisible, who are extremely impoverished, who are fleeing persecution in those countries where we found ourselves in these lands, in these Americas, right? So really wanted to bring us closer as the diaspora, understanding whether we are in Louisiana or in Haiti or in Panama or in Colombia, we must continue to understand that because we're separated on the way here, on the same boat, as a family, separated, sold to different people to be enslaved, doesn't mean we are no longer family. It just means that we have been separated, and now is the call for us to be reunited. So thank you so much for that. What's happening at the border right now, what you saw when you came with the team is still very much happening. We've probably heard about Title 42 that ended in May 11th, earlier this year. Title 42 is a policy that was put in place by the former president, really making it impossible for anyone to be able to have access to protection, access to asylum. And unfortunately, many of the people we saw under the Bridging W in September 2021 that suffered the abuse, who were whipped by white men in uniform, have been erased, continued abuse, and deported back to Haiti. Many of them have disappeared, never to be heard from again. So these are the realities that continues to be. We continue to fight extreme anti-Black racism within Mexico itself, because the reality is, for the Black migrants, it doesn't matter where they show up. They know they do not belong. So the anti-Black racism is extremely, extremely present when it comes to Black immigrants. A week and a half ago, we received a call and a family was kidnapped. We're still trying to figure out what happened. We've all heard the death of widow Anadis, who is Garifuna from Honduras, who are the indigenous black folks in that community, who died in CBP custody simply because her blackness was used against them. Mm-hmm. As people, their humanity was denied. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, lost her life. So we continue to uplift that. In addition to that, and we are sharing those because these are the realities of our siblings at the border. In addition to that, last week we buried 5 black migrants from Senegal, from the Congo, and one that we could not identify which country he was from, and another one from Haiti. So these are the situation on the ground. We continue to try our best to support, but you know what? Every day we see those people, even in those subhuman conditions that we saw them in Tijuana, though the fact that they are in even worse conditions in places like Reynosa and Matamoros, we're still hopeful, and we're still here, we're still fighting. Mm. And I also want to highlight one other thing. I don't know if you remember in March, early March, that we had 4 African Americans who went to Matamoros to get a medical procedure. They were kidnapped. 2 of them were killed. We were able to find 2, but unfortunately 2 of them were killed. They were killed because they thought they were migrants. They were killed because they thought they had no one who will come and look for them. It wasn't until they realized they had U.S. passports that they finally shed light on that. So I'm saying that because when we show up at the U.S.-Mexico border, when we show up in many places around the world, they don't care if we have a U.S. passport or Haitian passport. They see a black person, and death could be the result of that. Mm. I will stop there, but again, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much, Guerline, for putting that into perspective. A couple of things I was thinking about as you were speaking. One is that maybe, Daheen, you could explain a little bit more about what Haitian Bridge Alliance is doing. We were able to be on the ground with Haitian Bridge Alliance in Tijuana at a Haitian migrant shelter. But when I say shelter, and I think when we conceptualize shelter, we think of like a brick and mortar house. This was tents, I would say at best, where folks were sleeping with their children. And so we were able to have conversations with Daheen and Guerline and the black migrants there about their experience, about some of the treacherous and gut-wrenching, heart-wrenching experiences that black folks had been having there. I want to hear a little bit about, for folks who may or may not be keeping up with immigration reporting, this week a federal judge struck down Biden's administration policy to prevent migrants who pass through another country from seeking asylum in the U.S. 2 things. Guerline and Daheen, what are the implications of that on the ground? What is Haitian Bridge Alliance experiencing on the ground in the multiple stations that you all have in Mexico and in other countries in Central America?
Diane, I can quickly give an update on the policy, and then I'll pass it to you. Thank you so much for that. So basically, as my sister just mentioned, earlier this year, the administration put what we called the asylum ban, which really implies that people need to ask for asylum in Colombia and Guatemala and in Costa Rica, which I just mentioned. Black people are fleeing those places as well because it is so hard for them in many of those occasions. What happened 2 days ago is in California, the court ruled that the ban is illegal that people should be allowed to seek protection at the U.S.-Mexico border and not forced to ask for asylum in a different country as they are moving into South and Central America. So this is a great victory. However, the U.S. government have already put an appeal in motion. We only have a 14-day stay, so we don't know what will happen after 14 days. But for now, this is what the rules are. And I want to mention that people literally travel from country to country, fleeing different issues, including the war in Ukraine or wars in Cameroon and extreme instability in my homeland of Haiti right now. So as far as the work that we are doing, I'll pass it to my amazing colleague, Diane, to share.
Thank you so much, Guerline, and it's such a pleasure for us to be here. I really wish we could have been in person. So, I always get a little overwhelmed when talking about the work that Haitian Bridge Alliance does because it covers so much ground. But just to kind of state specifically on what we do along the border. So, for instance, when we hosted our family from Louisiana at the border in Tijuana, you guys were able to see us giving out donations, which is one of the major things that we do. So we normally work in direct connection with a lot of the shelters on the ground. We work with some of the clinics on the ground. And basically, we really serve as a bridge, right, to ensure that our brothers and sisters have what they need. One of the limitations on the border is the lack of the actual language barrier that exists. So a lot of times organizations do go and donate, or they do go and help, but unfortunately they can't really speak to the people. They can't really understand specifically what's happening. And so Haitian Bridge really does serve as the bridge that ties all of that together. So we'll do sessions, know your rights sessions for folks. We interpret, translate for them. We welcome families or friends that come visit, like we did for our Louisiana family. And basically we do everything within our power to ensure that our brothers and sisters on the border are heard. Whether that means ensuring that the kids have diapers and wipes and food, right? Whether that means that we're working hand in hand with the shelter owners. For instance, I remember being on the border about a month ago, and we left in Texas. The day after we left, it was like a major storm, and that major storm ruined all the tents that the families were living in. And so in situations like that, they will call Haitian Bridge and other partners, and we will work really diligently to try to provide whether it's tarps or whatever it may be that's needed. And so, like I said, our work really spans, it's almost impossible to really sit and say all the things that we do. But what I'd like to pinpoint is that we pride ourselves in keeping that connection. So once people are on the border, we help them, we work with them, whether it's helping them apply through CBP1, apply for an appointment, whether it's making sure they have the technologies that they need, access to technologies. And so, of course, there's a portion of our organization that does a lot of policy and advocacy work. But then also, we make sure that once our brothers and sisters cross into the U.S., that we still provide them support, because usually they're here in the middle of the U.S., they don't speak the language, they don't have the resources that they need, and so we work hand in hand with other partners to make sure they have that. So like I said, I could go on forever, but I'll stop.
Thank you so much. I want to shift the conversation a little bit into funding. That's why we're here. We're here to talk about the implications of philanthropy in this work. I want to uplift Mary D. Moran into the space. She's actually trying to get us money, so that's why she's not here. And I want to honor her vision and her determination to make this trip happen for us. One thing that many people may not know is Our Voice Nuestra Voz does not receive any funding for immigration, but we were still able, through the generosity of our donors, to make this trip happen for Black and Brown Americans here to really get on the ground and witness the challenges that our brothers and sisters are having on the border. So I do want to ask Guerline or Dahini, whoever feels called, what are some ways that we can support Haitian Bridge Alliance and the work that you all are doing on the ground? Some of us have seen firsthand with our own eyes, and how can we be called to action as radical acts of generosity with the folks that are here in this room?
Thank you so much for that. And for us, that is something we always forget, because I started Haitian Bridge Alliance, and for the first 5.5 years, I self-funded. I self-funded. And the reason is simply because as a Black woman who's going to be supporting you. And so many times we will find people say, oh, you're doing amazing work. And we've been watching for the past 5 years, but they are funding the white-led orgs. Right, but the Black-led org, the woman-led org, is something for them to watch. So it has been extremely difficult, and unfortunately for me, I had to empty, my savings, our retirement fund. All of this has been used in order for us to really create a space where there is no space for our people. With that being said, for right now, whatever type of support, one thing people say that we don't fund immigration, but understanding that immigrants are whole people. If you fund healthcare, we need that support. If you fund family services, we have a group of women whose husbands have been deported. So therefore, we have a community of fatherless and children and women really just fighting to survive every day. If you fund education, this is one of the things that we are looking into, right? So literally, when we look at immigrants as a person, no matter what kind of funding or support that you are able to provide, we are in dire need for that. A baby needs diaper, right? Or a mother need to go to see a doctor. We continue to bear. One thing we have been thinking about, how do we have a fund specifically to support us in burying and supporting families who literally are losing their lives. We currently also are the only Black immigrants bail fund in the country, and we have 105 men and women from Mauritania. And if you know anything about Mauritania, is that the Black folks in Mauritania are still enslaved. Today, we have people enslaved in Mauritania. So they are fleeing slavery and showing up here. We currently have 105 to 120 people from Mauritania who are in immigration prison. Each of them have been giving a bond for $5,000. They have not committed any crime. The only thing that they have come to ask for asylum, and they have been in prison, and we have to pay $5,000 for each one of them. So these are the many ways that we can support, but honestly, whether it is 5 cents, $5, $500,000, no matter what we can receive, that will mean a lot in the life and support of our community members.
Give thanks. Go ahead.
Thank you, Tiye, and thanks, Guerline, for that. I will also add that, one of the things, because the border is not a pleasant place to be, and, we do encourage folks to think twice before taking that trip, because it could mean their life. unfortunately many people don't have any other options. We currently do have access to the humanitarian parole program, where folks can be sponsored by an American and be able to, let's say, come from Haiti and come directly to the U.S., enter legally, immediately be able to apply for a work permit and start and get a social security number so they can quickly get on their feet. So that's really another great option. I would definitely encourage anyone who's able and willing to support a family, a person from Haiti. You know, you guys can always reach out to me directly. I'll make myself available. But that I find is one of the best ways, helping our brothers and sisters come directly through a legal program where they don't actually have to go to the border and risk their lives. Thank you.
Thank you. Our last question, and then until we see one another again when you all come to Louisiana and we throw you a glorious party, bring us back to April. Tell us your favorite moment in time of us spending with you all.
Oh wow! I think after you left, after the group left, and I think Diane and I, we were literally basking in the blessing of your presence. And also, you know, remember when our mother prayed. Oh, I'm going to get emotional now. Okay. Okay. This is not happening.
Let it flow.
All the men, you know, step behind them to let them know that they were holding them and that they were there for them.
Yes.
That was so powerful. And this is something that they have kept with them, that we were so grateful for them to see people who look like them, that was loving so hard of them. That was so beautiful and perfect. Thank you so much.
Give thanks.
I should have definitely gone first because that was my absolute favorite moment. I've been thinking about it. It was just absolutely so powerful. You know, I think we're also used to seeing men be strong and expect that, but in that moment, giving these men space to be vulnerable and to be weak and offering that support, like I hadn't seen anything like that in a very long time, and so that has always stuck with me. But one of the things that I will say is I've always been grateful for the conversations that we've had, whether it was the pre-dinner at the hotel or whether it was the conversation at the Casa Migrante, where all of us come together and sit and really get to hear one another and get to feel one another. That was very, very powerful as well. Thank you.
We give thanks for y'all. We're so grateful that y'all came to this conversation. We have missed you all dearly. I'm going to ask the audience, if you have a phone or you're by a phone, feel free to pull out your cell phone, go on Instagram, follow Haitian Bridge Alliance. What Guerline is talking about is on their Instagram about the migrants from Mauritania. And also go to their website. You can easily donate $1, $2, $3, $4. We're so grateful for you all. Thank you all for coming. Daheen, we email and text constantly, so I will talk to you all sooner than later. Thank y'all. I think everybody can say bye. Can y'all see us? I can't see where you see us at. Bye. Oh, you see us down here. Thank y'all so much. Wonderful. That was great, Taylor. Hit us with the, can you hit us with the roll up? Oh, wow. Moving right along to our lovely panelists that are here. How y'all feeling? Let's take a deep breath. Look to a neighbor and maybe say one thing that you heard from Guerline and Daheen that resonated with you. because, this is an intimate conversation. This isn't a panel discussion. So, we're going to get into this. It's so funny because I really had this timed out to a T. We were going to be rapping at 7:30, but we not. We on spirit time, okay? So, we're going to keep it rolling. Get you what you need. Get water, get wine, and we're going to turn it to the folks that we have here with us. Y'all ready? So we have Homero all the way to my far left. We have Dennis and we have Jailaih here with us to chat a little bit about funding our freedom. We got Taylor on the technology. First question, Homero and Dennis, you all went on the border trip. Hopefully you all had a wonderful, life-changing experience. If you didn't, don't tell our intimate conversation that. First question is, what was the trip like for you? And how would you describe the role that community played while you were on the trip?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that question?
What was the trip like for you? And how would you describe the role community played?
Can you guys hear me okay? Yes. So I'm Dennis Bagneris with the Kellogg Foundation. I have spoken to everyone in the aftermath of this journey and have described it as life-changing. For myself in the work that I do, but also for me as a family person, as a father, and just someone of community and of color. I was not anticipating the levels of impact that would resonate with me with this trip. And I felt incredibly fortunate that I knew if I would have taken this trip alone, it could have potentially destroyed me. But having gone in the community with the group that you guys put together, was so uplifting. I joked with Homero about the word that came from me was brotherhood from this, but in all honesty, I felt like at certain points in this trip, emotionally held, sometimes physically held, spiritually held this entire journey that allowed me to learn from it. And it was reflective even in mine. I think I mentioned this on the last day that it really exposed in me having really met with community, because when you guys brought us in that room on that first day and say, prepare yourself, this is going to be emotionally, I was like, girl, please. I work with deep, dark stories all day long, but I was not prepared to be in those spaces and feel and resonate with the history of that experience. Hear firsthand accounts from people. And I cried for 2 days. I cried the entire, you saw me. I cried while we were there. I cried 2 days after, just trying to put it into perspective of how, because you come back from a trip like this, you like, where's my cape? I need to go. Something needs to happen quickly. But just emotionally for me, it really grounded me. I just told him, I was like, I thought I approached this work without ego before. Understanding what these individuals are going through was level setting in a way that I just wasn't prepared for. But I didn't choose because, again, the weight of the group, the weight of everybody's experience, what I took from it, I am not letting this devolve me into a darkness. Instead, I'm looking at the light of opportunity in this space and being held up in a way that it is inspiring me now to work harder to pursue opportunities to support this work where and when I can find it.
Give thanks.
I'm Homero Lopez with ISLA. I work in immigration on a daily basis. It's the work that I do. I'm going to build off of what Dennis was saying, which I think to me the biggest thing was seeing everybody not fall into that darkness, because it is easy. It can easily be overwhelming and just kind of wash your hands and step back and say, it's too much, I really can't, me as one person. But to see everybody come back, to see everybody come together and say, okay, how can I do more? I remember Kristen sitting there for a while and thinking and being like, I need to process this because I need to get it more involved. I need to participate. This is happening. She was thinking about how there's kids that she has, that she works with, how this comes up, right? Folks who work in education thinking like, okay, I see these families in New Orleans or in Baton Rouge or wherever it is that I'm working. And so folks thinking, getting, as also Guerline said earlier, immigration isn't some set aside thing. It's not like, oh, immigrants somehow live in this other atmosphere. Healthcare, education, working, like all of that comes together as one. And so, human beings. And so to me, it was seeing everybody come together, very much that community aspect, and trying to identify how can we plug into the work and help solve these issues and make a better world for folks. That to me was the most moving and inspiring aspect of the trip.
Love that. Thank you for sharing. Jailaih, you did not come on the trip, but you said, pull up on me. You have been called to this work. Tell us what makes you come alive in relationship to immigration. Clearly you have this understanding that we're not free until all of us are free. And so how did you get into this work, and why do you stay in this work?
Great question. So I feel like I got into this work in the most organic way. I was raised around people that did not look like me, but shared struggles that at the time I did not understand. And so I think that as I got older and I exposed myself to more diverse communities, and then once I moved to New Orleans, I was like, oh my goodness, there are so many people that don't look like me. Let me get to understand them and learn from them. So I feel like that is kind of what fueled me to keep going in this work. I always say that I'm forever a student. And so anybody that I meet that doesn't look like me, I'm immediately, so what do you like to do? What's your family like? Do you talk to your parent? Like, I'm asking all those questions just to further understand. But I think that is kind of what keeps me fueled, is getting that knowledge to learn from different experiences, and also understanding that everyone's experience is different. Just because it is one group that I'm speaking with that may look the same, they all have different experiences. And I feel like that fuels me as well, just being able to grasp all that knowledge. And then once I learned about Nuestra Voz, I feel like I got even more deeper into the work. I did the fellowship class with Nuestra Voz, which if you have not heard about the fellowship class they do, please, please, please keep your ears open for when the next one opens. But I feel like that also gave me...
Plug. This is not scripted.
That also gave me a deeper perspective and more knowledge about the, I may pronounce it wrong, the Gardafunia community, and what they were going through here in New Orleans, because I didn't even know that was a community that was right next door. So, yeah, that's my spiel.
Nana Jumphrey, the executive director of Black Alliance for Just Immigration, said this quote: "This country does not want its own Black people. Now we're going to accept Black people from other countries who don't speak the language and have no cultural connection. As Black Americans specifically, what is our collective responsibility to migrants and to our the newly arrived migrant community, especially when we're dealing with anti-Blackness, anti-indigeneity, and white supremacy?"
So I'll go first.
You're Black, you should.
Yes. So I think the biggest thing for me is to, one, be willing to listen. I think that understand. I think that a lot of confusion that comes from, meeting someone or working with the migrant community, they may not speak the same language. In the fellowship class that we had, I wish my girl Fanny was here, but she is not. She did not speak the same language as me, but I made it a point of, okay, we don't speak the same language. Let me get on my Duolingo then and try to figure out how I can communicate with you so that we can have some form of a relationship. If I didn't know what was going on, I'm pulling out my translator. So there's literally no excuse to me in this day and age to not be able to communicate with people that may not speak your same language. To me, that's my experience. But I say that to say that I think that as a person of color, as a Black person who lives in New Orleans, I think the biggest thing is just to listen and understand, but also to take initiative. I feel like, again, it's right in our backyard of what's happening. There are organizations that are doing the work. We are very well scripted, well-versed people. We know how to do the work and find and research. And so I would say just get involved all the way, not halfway.
I'm loving these plugs.
Migrants, illegal, displaced, they're people of color. And for the record, I'm also black. And in this work, while it raises up an importance of as far as understanding the populations in need, their labels, and at the end of the day, these labels are used to separate and marginalize. And we have to get past that, to Homero's earlier point. And I can't remember if we said this on mic or when we were just talking, but these are humanitarian causes. We want to lift them up. Obviously, I feel a kinship to wanting to help other people of color, but at the end of the day, whether they're in America, not in America, nobody deserves this. Everybody deserves a full opportunity at a full life. The pursuit of happiness is something that's scripted on a piece of paper that is not even held up, in the basic laws and the basic politics of this country. But at the end of the day, looking across borders, across tables, just into the eyes and face of another human being, it sometimes astounds me the level of evil and hatred and bias. All built behind simple fears that when you can release it and find common ground, you understand to accept the heart and soul of another person and believe in their worth and believe in their values. I think that's where we should all find space to resonate, and that's how I think we should show up in the work. I think that's how we should show up in this conversation. But at the end of the day, I think we should all be striving for a world and a place that treats people with dignity and value.
Homero, you're not black, so I'm gonna give you a different question. Okay. You do this work every single day. If you don't know about the work that Homero and ISLA does, look them up, pull up on them, help them out, send them some dollars. How did this trip in particular maybe shift or change or fuel the work that you're doing at ISLA on behalf of migrants and immigrants who are new, specific, let's say Louisiana, because you're mobbing out all over the state?
Yeah, I think a big part of it was there being so many native New Orleanians as part of the trip, and you don't run into many native New Orleanians right now, unfortunately. Generally speaking, in many circles, you don't run into many native New Orleanians in New Orleans. And so seeing folks like Reggie make the connection between, I remember he posted about going into Tijuana and someone asking him if he was scared, and he's like, I grew up in the East, like I'm good, I got this. Making those connections of like, it's that same struggle, right? And like Dennis was saying, it is that same struggle, and that's what we should be tapping into. Instead of letting these things that constantly divide this, I'm black or I'm brown or I'm white or I'm whatever, instead of letting that be the division, instead of tapping into that same connection, right? Anytime that I argue this in court on a regular basis when someone gets arrested because they're a Hispanic male, and I'm like, who are you talking about? Is it Sammy Sosa or Canelo Alvarez or Alberto Fujimori or Tenoch Huerta? Like, it spans the radius, right?
Yeah.
And we, the struggle spans throughout all of those folks. And so I think being able to tap into that common ground is the important aspect of that. And the humanity, the values, what it is that we are trying to promote, not what it is that we're trying to be part of that divides.
Yeah. Give thanks. This past week there were.
Can I add something too? I'm sorry.
Absolutely.
Something
it's your
Homero
world.
brought up that I wanted to mention too when he mentioned the fear, and I kind of touched on it, and you helped me bring me back. I remember when I first got invited to go on this trip. And I was excited because I never been to Mexico, and I wanted to see it. And I told my family and friends that I was, for work, I'm going to have this great opportunity to go to Mexico. And before I could even finish why I was going, everybody told me, be careful. You hope, not Mexico, you got to watch out. They'll kidnap you. I'm 6'2", 300 pounds. Who's throwing me in the back of a van? I asked my own mother, because my mother was like, oh, be careful, somebody might take you. I'm like, and what resonated with me is that the fear was so ridiculous. And when I got there, I didn't know what to expect. But when we went to Tijuana, and we were walking at the border, and people were coming up to us and like, hey, you want me to take your photo? Little kids like, hey, how you doing? There was music playing. You could smell food being cooked. We listened to the waves come off the water. And I was like, this place is beautiful. And the connection was finally for me was that it's a campaign. It's a campaign to create this fear. So that even within our own communities of color, we're campaigning to cannibalize ourselves because that's what they want you to think. I posted on Instagram. I came back. I remember before I was kind of concerned when I got that. But when I got back for the next 2 days, I told you I was emotional. But when I got back, people were like, "Ooh, how was your trip? Did everything okay?" I immediately went to blast mode. I was like, "You are being brainwashed. Mexico's beautiful. Leave those people alone. We need to help." So as a person of color, I was just like, this is family. These people are our people, my people. We are letting constructs divide us in a way that we need to get out and experience to see so we can make our own interpretations, make our own judgments. Because if we are in those spaces, then we will feel that connection. We will feel that humanitarianism, like that moment we had when we met with the representatives from the Haitian Bridge Alliance.
Give thanks. This past week, there were protests at ICE New Orleans offices around the death behind bars to honor Ernesto, who we called into the space earlier. He died in ICE custody in Gina, Louisiana. I want people to really understand that this is not a theoretical issue. This is an issue that people are facing in real time and in real life. I want to shift a little bit, I guess, a two-part question. You can, this is like multiple choice. I guess you take what feels good for you. How do we shift Black people, either from New Orleans or from the South, to be in healthy and right relationship, to your point, Dennis, you must have read my notes, with migrants in our city or in state? Or what are some initiatives that your organization is doing to support migrants and newly arrived folks to the city and the state?
I'll be happy to talk about that one. I think a large part of it is like everything we do at the Kellogg Foundation is about narrative shift, right? We understand that it starts with who's controlling the message, who's controlling the media, and we know far too often that's not the people that should be representing that dynamic. If this work is going to be catalyzed in a way that begins to kind of change the context, we've got to change the narrative. In order for us to do that, again, we need to be in place. We need to be side by side, working with organizations, holding them up. Again, also coming from a place not where we are quote unquote empowering people, but we're sharing power together so that we come up together. I think that's also a big part of it. I think a lot of times in this work too, people have that mentality, and not just white people. People of color have this mentality that I'm saving them, whoever they are, and at the same time, that's not the case. It needs to be a partnership and a collaboration, because I think if one person comes in to try to save the day in this scenario, it's already off bet. It's off kilter, off balance, and you're not going to get like a true collaborative effect. And I think in order to really change narrative, this work has to be done in community together, in campaigns that publicly that message is being told and we own it.
Give me the multiple choice again. Sorry.
Multiple choice is, how can we shift Black people from New Orleans or the South to be in healthy relationship with migrants in the city or the state in your case, because you're all over the place? Or what are some initiatives that ISLA is doing to help fund the relationship with folks who are migrating here?
I think having conversations. I think Mary's, like, I've been talking with Mary about this trip since 2018, I think it was, 2018, 2019. She's had this vision, right? And I think having somebody like Mary that shares, that straddles, for lack of a better word, that border, right? Between being a Black, an Afro-Latina who has this connection, grew up within a Black community, at home, had the Latino connection, somebody who, she's the person to make this trip happen. And she's the person to tap into the community, have these conversations. Dennis going back into the community, right? Identifying these ambassadors, for lack of a better word, to go in and have those conversations and explain, like, nah, there's no reason to be afraid, right? There's no reason to be afraid of going in, Reggie making that connection to New Orleans. Like, I've seen this. I've seen these kids. These are the kids I grew up with. This is the same situation. I think constantly just more and more exposure and having those conversations and going against the narrative, right? Part of what Dennis said with the narrative, Title 42, which Guerline brought on earlier, when it ended, all the news coverage was about how the border was going to be flooded and so many people coming in, this massive surge. The word surge was used so many times in the news, and it didn't happen. Right? All of this money went to Border Patrol and all of this money to activate the National Guard and get them on the border. It's a narrative, right? It's this fear mongering. And one more thing that I'll add in from a broader Louisiana thing, Ernesto, he died in Gina, Louisiana. Those of you that are aware of Louisiana's history, in 2008, Gina was a big issue. That same space that was shut down and where these kids were being held, it used to be a juvenile detention center, is now an immigration detention center. The same places that were shut down as jails in places like Basile, Louisiana, in Jonesboro, in Jackson Parish, those same places that were shut down in 2017 as a result of criminal justice reform bills have now become immigration detention centers. It's the same spaces, it's the same story, it's the same struggle. It's just a different, quote unquote, group of people. And so that is the it's that united struggle. It's that we're fighting the same issue, we're fighting the same attacker. We need to come together and make sure that we unite to fight against them.
I have one more question for the panel, and then we're going to open it up to our intimate conversation. Last question. Anybody can answer this. How can we continue to center humanity when we are the gatekeepers of funding and capital so that the money and the resources, I never even knew that about Guerline and Haitian Bridge Alliance, is getting to the people who need it the most?
I would love to answer that question. I am deep in the philanthropic world. The comment made by Guerline about self-funding the work and not really being invested in organizations or the people hearing about what she's doing, but as a Black woman just wanting to see it and not invest in it. The work that we do at the Women's Foundation of the South is to create a solution for that and to invest in nonprofits that are led by women of color in the South specifically. So, hello, another shameless plug. But all that to say, that was just a prime example of what we're battling of. Even myself, I have my own nonprofit, the Forest Bias Market, which I won't even plug that one. But
do your thing.
It's an all-Black farmers market held quarterly to invest in, the economic development. But all that to say that I also too am self-funding as well, and I have found that when I go out to speak about the work that I'm doing that impacts people that look like me, it sounds good. I'll come out to an event, but there's no money being given. And so I think the biggest thing in my experience from seeing that and experiencing that, I am continuing to lift up the people that I work with in these organizations in rooms that do have the philanthropic dollars, to the donors that I speak with. I mean, one time, Ty, I didn't even want to say this, but I was on a WFS donor call and lifted up Nuestra Voz.
You did?
Yes, ma'am. Just because I feel like that is kind of the power. I understand the power in my voice and that I'm able to be put into these rooms where I can speak up about, hey, there are these organizations that are doing this work that need funding, and I can put you in contact with that person to make sure that's facilitated. And I don't just put them in contact with the person and then dip out. I stick with the person to make sure the funding is closed. So just continuing to use your voice to lift up the dollars that need to be facilitated if you are in those rooms. And I'm so blessed that I've been able to be put in rooms with the white people that have the funds to support, and calling them out on their, excuse my French, bullshit, and letting them know where they can send the dollars, because that is kind of what pushes the work. But also, in terms of what pushes the work, it's not just the money, also the time. I think that a lot of people don't realize the value in time. I personally think time is more valuable than money. And I feel like there are a lot of ways that people can support this work outside of just the monetary. If you cannot give the $5, the $10, although that does really significantly help, if you can't, you can always give your time and volunteer. And so I do that with No Extra Voice as well. And so I always want to plug in that any way that you can use your voice in these rooms for these organizations and to speak up, do it, because no one else is going to do it.
For the Kellogg Foundation and anything we invest in, the importance of being in place and in space is very important to us, because we know that foundations in the past have talked a good game, not even shown up in these areas, or they're just giving blanketly and not following through to make sure that there's a return on investment. For everything that the Kellogg Foundation does, we go in first. There's an interview process, there's an investigation, there's an entire team that does asset development and building to figure out where is real opportunity for power building and infrastructural, strategy making. I'm happy to announce that I am fortunate to work with the Kellogg Foundation, which already has a huge presence in immigration reform, Haiti. In fact, I just recently found out that we are one of the top 3 funders helping to rebuild infrastructure in Haiti itself. Our donation at the foundation outpaces the federal government's amount of money that's given to that community. So we are very deeply invested into Haiti. But I will also say the hindsight of understanding that this is a multi-strategy approach to this work, right? We don't just dump the money in Haiti and like, okay, Haiti, figure it out. With the Kellogg Foundation, everything for us resonates behind creating a better world for our young people. And you can't do that without the families being stable. And the families can't be stable if they don't have real economic opportunities. And economic opportunities don't exist if you don't help to build up a wealth structure, right? So for us, we're giving in Haiti because we know Haiti is where a lot of people are in distress and where they're coming from. That opportunity needs to shift. But we're also piloting into immigration reform, right? What's happening at the borders, where policy needs to be adjusted and shifted so that we're looking at more humane ways or combating inhumane approaches to the existing policies. And then finally, we're funding on this side. To the young lady's point earlier, if it's education, if it's family economic services, if it's family supports, we're making sure to check all the boxes. So I would say for anybody who's invested in foundation, and finally what I would say is we also realize that we can't do it on our own. So we take our experiences, we take our learning report, we take our data, and we work to create collaboratives that can show up, because no one foundation can obviously do any of this work alone. No one check Kellogg is ever going to write is going to save the world. However, we are collaboratively working with the last 8 years of data that we have to mount campaigns to get other foundations to the table to make impact. And not just, again, with the dollar signs, and the thought partnership around policy shifts and real strategy adjustments. So it has to be a full-on effort on multi-layers to really shift the narrative and really shift strategic change if we're talking about building new systems or at least breaking down terrible ones.
Last but not least,
I'm seeing a thread, right?
What's the thread?
Between Guerline, here.
Okay.
Started ISLA, also no money. I didn't go 5 years. I went 3-4 months without getting paid, but still, I took my cash out from Catholic Charities and funded myself for that time frame. And so there's the thing that I've noticed, especially in those first 3 to 4 years, is Same thing that Guerline said, right? We'll watch you. We'll see what you do. We like what you're doing, but we're not going to give you the money because we don't trust you yet, right? We don't necessarily trust that you're going to be able to make this work. So we're going to make it harder for you to make it work by not giving you the money in order to see if you make it work. And then we'll come in once you do make it work after 3 to 4 years and say, oh, look at us. We're going to support you now. And so I think that's a big issue that comes up, right? This lack of trusting, particularly Black and brown folks who start up something that come from within the community, that know what the needs are, that are trying to uplift those needs and address those needs. And those are the groups that are not being funded. Now, I get calls from national groups who want to speak to our clients because they want to do a report about how terrible the situation is. And then they send out a report. They come and they talk to them, and those folks say, oh, we need representation. Right? Yes, we want to end detention as well. But while I'm in detention right now, what I need is representation. In this moment, I have a right now need. And they go out, they release that report saying these conditions are horrible, and look at Maria, who I spoke with, and how terrible it's been for her, and look at her story, and give us money, and we raised now $2 million from that we're not going to invest back in. And so having those conversations and calling that out when we are not willing to invest into the needs of the community itself, what people are asking for in the moment, because that won't work within your theory or within what your perspective is of what the final goal is. People have needs right now. Like, yeah, great, it's theoretical, let's abolish it. Great, I'm down, let's do it, let's take it down. I'm with you too. But folks currently are locked up and need to get out of there. And that's what you should be focusing on, right? Or not necessarily solely focusing on, but definitely making sure that you're funding and that you're providing that support. You said earlier, radical gifts that come, radical acts of giving. We got lucky. We had someone who said, hey, I have inherited wealth. It was inherited from terrible situations and slavery and whatnot that my family got money from. I don't want you to have to struggle to show that you're doing the work. So I'm going to just give you a ton of money at the beginning. And she put the trust in us. She gave us the money, and she let us. It was a good starter, and then that got us going. But that hardly ever happens, right? That was an individual who has a bunch of money who gave it to us. That wasn't a foundation. That wasn't a big organization. That was an individual giving us that money to make sure that we could push that along.
Give thanks, Homero. I'm going to come to you. I got you. Last question. You're actually going to talk to one another, and then we'll open it up for questions. I'm going to let the time go. Mary is probably like, don't look at the time. Okay, where's Tomac? Help me with my Haitian Creole. I know, but you have the language down better than me. So this is a Haitian Creole saying that actually we brought up in our first meeting. And when we started connecting with Haitian Bridge Alliance, it was on their website. Men apil chai palu. Men alpil chai palu. Many hands make the load lighter. You're going to talk to your partner, a new friend, someone else. What is your personal commitment outside of the titles, the pay, the money towards migrants and people who are newly arrived into this country?